Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts.
David Evans, welcome to the conversation today.
Thank you, John. Great to be here with you.
It is a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Napa, California. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about the use of AI coaching bots in management coaching and training. This is kind of the brave new world, kind of the frontier of coaching and executive coaching, training, and the use of AI. I think when we think about technology and we think about disruptive innovations, there's all sorts of things that may come to mind. And when you rewind, 18 plus months ago, and you think about ChatGPT emerging, there are all sorts of disruptions that, came about because of it. And within the learning and development space and within the executive coaching space, I think immediately folks like us started to think about, well, what about coaching bots? What about how that could disrupt the space? And I don't know about you, but almost immediately I started playing around with how could I train a coaching bot and how good would it actually be? And even back then in the early days, I remember when ChatGPT came out, like literally within that first week, I started training some coaching bots just to see like what it would be like. And I'm like, this isn't half bad. And obviously things have even improved dramatically over the last 18 plus months. So we're going to explore this together today and see like what is the wild west of AI in the world of learning and development and management coaching and training, and what does that mean for the future. As we get started, I wanted to share David's bio with everybody. David Evans is the Vice President of Product at New Level Work, formerly Better Manager. In this role, David is responsible for overseeing the product vision and strategy for the company, helping it to achieve its mission of making thriving at work the norm by developing better leaders. Prior to joining New Level Work, David led talent success at Amplitude, where he supported the growth of managers and their teams, scaling company culture as the business scaled. Now, I could go on. There's so many different things David has achieved in his career, but I'm going to pause there, David. Anything you would like to highlight from your background, personal context, your career, before we dive on in further?
I mean, pertinent to this conversation, I led a music technology company back in the early mid 2000s, and that was a very early application of the sorts of technologies that underlie LLMs today. So we were using neural nets and other machine learning techniques to analyze and judge musical performances. And after doing that, because of the black box nature and hallucinations of these sorts of technologies that we're all starting to become very familiar with today, I sort of always swore that I would never work with AI again. I put it in the bucket of children and animals. Never work with children or animals and AI. And so really, what you said about GPT shifted my mindset again. Like is very clear that this was now a truly transformational and useful technology on such a broad number of applications. So here I am at New Level Work, diving back into the deep waters of artificial intelligence and trying to make work better or a space better using AI.
Yeah, interesting. So I'm curious, what were some of those early days? Now, let me actually step back for a moment. Like you said, large language models, AI, deep machine learning, these things weren't new 18 plus months ago, right?
Right.
These have been in development for decades. There have been different applications of these for a long time. You just mentioned one that's been very important for a long time. So ChatGPT getting unleashed on the world, December of what was that, 2022 or whenever that was,
Yeah.
that that was transformative just because of the scale, right? Like all of a sudden it was unleashed on everybody, and the usage of it was transformative, right? But the fact that, people had been studying this and using it for a long time shouldn't be overlooked. But I'm curious, once that was released, what was your initial thoughts? How did you start to engage with it and perhaps play around with it? And what were some of your initial concerns, or any of those types of things back then?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, so this technology had been in the works for a long time, and really it's the exponential growth in processing power that enabled the quality that GPT, ChatGPT, or GPT 3.5 achieved, that then enabled lay persons to start finding that technology useful and create a bunch of use cases. I think one of the big issues with 3.5, as well as 4 and Omni as well, 4.0, and any of the sort of large language models that we have access to in the world right now, is just that they're trained on the internet. And so for coaching purposes and training purposes, that's a problem because, as we all know, there's a lot of trash on the internet. And so one of our first goals and, one of our first projects was, how can we constrain the information space that these bots have in order to produce high quality results when humans interact with them? So one piece was the information space. And then the second challenge we immediately wanted to overcome was, how do we improve the ability for humans to prompt the chatbot well? So, a lot of people, when they first start interacting with GPT or, any of these other LLMs, they use very generalized prompts. And, what we saw very quickly was that prompt engineering is a skill. And, we know that people with strong prompt engineering skills are getting paid hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars a year, because the ability to get maximum performance from these bots is the skill of prompt engineering. And so I think those two things were the biggest challenges to this technology being useful. I think in particular in growing and developing managers and leaders. So one, just the quality of the responses, and two, the quality of the prompt.
Yeah, I noticed that too. And it was incredible back then. I remember the very first, it was probably a day after it was released that I started reading some of those first articles, watching some of those first videos, and started playing around myself. And I was so super skeptical at first.
Me too.
But it only took half an hour of playing around with it until that skepticism quickly faded away. And there were still problems with it, don't get me wrong. Like, immediately I saw, okay, this isn't perfect by any means, but the skepticism started to fade away, and I started to realize, prompt engineering is going to be important. There's going to be hallucinations, there's going to be problems, absolutely, but my goodness, is there power here, and are we going to be able to leverage this in all sorts of new powerful ways that we haven't even thought of yet, right? And it's only vastly improved over the last 18 months. And like you said, the rise of computing power just continues to grow exponentially. And so, where we're at today is not where we're going to be at 6 months from now, or a year from now, or 5 years from now. So our ability to continue to improve exponentially, the sky's the limit, I guess, in terms of how we're going to continue to be able to improve. So who knows? Who knows what we're going to be able to do? That brings with it all sorts of questions, all sorts of concerns, or all sorts of ethical concerns with it. That's all sorts of stuff we can unpack. I'm going to set that aside for another day because there's all sorts of other things we can discuss. But I do want to come back now and talk about this within the scope of this, executive coaching space. Because like I said at the very beginning in the introduction, one of the very first things, because I'm in this space, I work with executives, I consult, I do coaching, some of those sorts of things. And I'm like, very quickly, I just played around with it. I'm like, hey, it's not half bad. Like, you get real-time answers. Some of it's generic, some of it's not the best, but we also know not all coaches are the best either. Like mileage varies. And so like it can be kind of impressive. So what have been some of your thoughts as you've used some of these tools? And is there a balance between how we use these types of tools, how we leverage them as coaches ourselves, but also, leveraging them, but also matching them with the human side, I guess?
Yeah, great question, John. So, you mentioned that some coaches aren't the greatest, and so, I think we've seen now that these LLMs, when properly used, when the information space is constrained, when the prompt engineering is high quality, and then also we have like a complex multi-agent architecture. So just for folks, that might sound like gibberish, but we're using multiple instances of LLMs that have their own very specific jobs and very like constrained use cases and specific prompts that we can, definitely produce a management coach that is much better than a cheap coach. So a lot of large coaching platforms, they will deploy $50 an hour, $70 an hour coaches with no management experience and very little coaching experience to coach new managers. And yeah, I mean the quality is highly questionable. And I think what we are seeing is that it's easy to, once you constrain the information space of the LLM, to have it teach the skills that we know that new managers need. So, the transition from being an individual contributor to being a manager for the first time is a lot about skills acquisition. And, if you're deploying a cheap coach versus, a complex architecture of LLMs, the complex architecture of LLMs actually knows a lot more about those management skills than the cheap coach does. So, I mean, one of the things that I'm seeing is that that's going to go away. So there is not going to be a role for for a coach without any real world leadership experience, management experience, and without any real coaching experience, coaching new managers. I think that's going to go away very quickly. I think, by the end of this year, large enterprises are going to be deploying AI in place of those cheap coaches in that role. I think we'll still see, sort of life coaches supplementing the AI. So the AI will be more focused on teaching the skills. Those managers still need support from a human. So, we all want to be held. We all want to be, have space held for us, and that's that's a big leap. That's a big shift in someone's life to go from being an individual contributor to a frontline manager. And so in terms of emotional well-being, we'll still definitely see the deployment of real human coaches, and to that particular cohort of managers. But I think we'll see LLMs doing a much better job there. And I know the second part of your question, how does this support us as human coaches? So we're seeing our technology in-house and then, some of our competitors starting to really leverage this technology to augment human coaches where there's a lot of unstructured data. So, one example of that that is common to almost every coaching engagement is the collection of 360 feedback.
Mm-hmm.
So, traditionally that is a hugely laborious process for a coach, not just collecting the data, but then processing and synthesizing that data and putting it into a format that's easily digestible for the coachee. And this is something that we've found, LLMs, again, when properly architected, are fantastic at. And you can very quickly, very cheaply, maybe even do it better than a human can do it, just because a coach's time is a good coach is hundreds of dollars an hour plus. So and you can do it for a dollar, just as well, if not better, with LLM. So that's one place, and there are a ton of other similar applications around unstructured data, and we can dive into those as well. So, but then also, I think another really big place to look, and for I think listeners to look, is accountability structures. So, as coaches, we tend to see our clients every other week at the most, a couple of times a month. And what we're finding is that leveraging LLMs as accountability structures in between sessions, it's just a really powerful augmentation of the human coach that supports acceleration of development of the coachee and higher goal achievement.
Yeah, let's talk about that for just a little bit, because I do think that is a very powerful thing. I do think humans want to interact with humans, especially in coaching relationships. I don't think that's going away. So I do think there's still going to be a desire to have that, whatever the frequency is, to actually have a human on the other side, whether that's in person or over Zoom or whatever, right? But for more frequent check-ins for those accountability elements, or for just the frequent questions or whatever, for those little check-in points, I think having the bots there is going to be super powerful. And even before AI, even before the chatbots, I know there were companies that had technology to help with some of that accountability piece. I think this is just going to be able to make that more personalized, more powerful. Can you speak a little bit more to that?
For sure. So, accountability can be thought of in a number of ways. And I think generally when we hear accountability, we think of like checking in on someone. Did they do what they say they were going to do? But as coaches, of course, we know that accountability is all about deepening the learning. And the difference between the sort of either algorithmic or traditional ML use cases around accountability and the use cases for LLMs really is that LLMs can deepen the learning like human coaches can as part of the accountability.
Yeah.
So we've built use cases around that, and one of them is the simple check-in, like did you do what you said you were going to do at this date and at this time? But then for the LLM to actually debrief what happened. So, take on that role of the coach, because the learning that can happen immediately after the action was taken, rather than waiting 2 weeks or whatever it is before the human coach can have that discussion, the opportunity there is just so much greater, and the learning can then continue and deepen throughout those gaps. Something else we've seen work really well is someone's committed to an action, but then they get cold feet. They've committed to going to their boss and setting expectations around something, and that's scary, right? In that power dynamic, we've built an application that role plays. So, in between, like right before they go and have that conversation, they can, as many times as they want, practice with a bot that conversation. The bot can give them feedback. The bot can impersonate their boss, and you can give the bot the personality traits and the context, and it just does such a fantastic job of building the manager's confidence so they actually do the thing they've committed to doing. So, and then there are more examples of that, but I think they're the two strongest use cases around accountability and the just the much deeper version of accountability that we can leverage LLMs for, as opposed to algorithmic or quote traditional ML technologies.
Yeah, I love it. I really do think there's so many, potential positive applications where we can utilize these tools to supplement what we're doing. So I'm definitely not one, to run around Chicken Little like, the sky is falling, doomsday, let's, freak out. I just don't think so. I think we look at these tools as opportunities. We figure out how to leverage them to help our clients, to help those around us, to help us. I think we can be better coaches. I think we can better serve our clients as we utilize these tools and other tools. And I think it behooves us to stay on top of these technologies, to try them out, to test them out. All of that is going to help us be better at what we do, and that excites me. I think and I hope that excites everyone in the audience. Because it means that even if we've become skilled practitioners, even if we feel like we're not only skilled and have the competencies and capabilities, but we're like artists in this practice, that there's still more for us to learn, and there's still more for us to learn and grow into. And I don't know about you, but that's something, I don't want to ever become stagnant. I want to always be pushing and stretching myself, just like I want to be stretching, helping those that I work with stretching themselves as well.
I love that framing, John. And I think a lot of coaches out there will love that framing too. We get to be artists instead of doing all of the grunt work. So, our capacity is freed up to harness the creativity of the human being that we are. And just for the kind of learning leaders out there and HR leaders out there, the same for you. Like, these LLMs can be used to harness these large unstructured data sets that you have in your organization, all of your performance data, your TA data, et cetera, like all of those interview notes that people have created about new leaders to identify strengths and gaps of that population, to continually update those strengths and gaps based on data that's moving in your organization that previously was not completely unusable, but not so useful. So it can free you up to be more creative as a learning leader, and then also help you to frame that data better when you're speaking to your CFO, your CEO, to the board. LLMs are great at translating that data into the language that the CFO speaks or the board speaks. Anyway, I just wanted to leave folks with that as well.
I love it. David, this has just been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to really take to heart everything that's been said here. David, before we wrap up, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience anything else that you think would be important to leave them with, but also how can they connect with you, find out more about your work, your team, and any other final word that you might have.
I would just reinforce everyone going and looking at all of the unstructured data that talent management processes produce. So, any open-ended feedback or survey questions, all of that is your gold mine that LLMs can help you to analyze and synthesize and leverage in growing and developing the people in your organization.
Perfect. Perfect. David, again, thank you so much. I encourage the audience to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what David can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe. They can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.